Hi everyone, and welcome to our seventh webinar. I don't even remember anymore. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are. Today we're going to talk about how do we continue online engagement, especially as so many of us have been doing this for quite some time. And week 1 obviously looks different than week 8, week 12, things of that nature. Today, for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, thank you. And for everyone who continues to join us, thank you very much. Just a few things on our protocols. You'll see on the bottom of your screen, there are 2 options. One is the chat, so please feel free over in the chat to click on where it says 2. You want to write all panelists and attendees, and then feel free to write, where you are, where you're coming from, things of that nature. Within the chat, we'll also be sharing links to resources, anything that any of our panelists refer to today will go in there. Afterwards, we'll transcribe that and we'll send out the links to any of the resources and things of that nature in there as well. You'll also see an option on the bottom that says chat. And the chat, Q&A. The Q&A is if there are direct questions you would like to ask our panelists. Now, as you know, when you registered for the webinar today, we also asked if you had questions ahead of time. So the main focus of our questions in the first part of the chat will be addressing the questions that you've already submitted. And then the second half of the chat will be open-ended, where any questions that are listed in the Q&A, my colleague John Burns will be helping us take care of those. We'll be addressing the evolution of online learning and continuing engagement. We'll be looking at what opportunities have we found. We'll be looking at how do we continue online engagement with primary school students, then with secondary students. Then we're going to be talking about Zoom fatigue, which we know what that is. And then how do we sustain this over longer periods of time. Then we'll turn it over to the Q&A. What else am I trying to remember for today? I'm going to be facilitating the conversation. My name's Dana Watts. I'm the Director of Research and Development at ISS. My wonderful colleague John Burns is going to be taking care of all of our technology issues and helping us with the Q&A. And then I would like to introduce you to our wonderful panelists. So our first panelist today, Keisha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Keisha Labich. I am the EAL coordinator at NCIC Immersion School in Shenzhen, China. We are a dual language immersion school and we have students from PY to 8th grade. So for us, we went on holidays, Chinese New Year holidays in January, and when we should have returned in February, we could not be back on campus. So we've been online since the 10th of February. Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and I look forward to sharing some of what our teachers have been doing to try to alleviate that or address it in some way.
Wonderful. And John?
Yeah, welcome everybody. It's lovely to be here. My name is John Micton. I'm at the International School of Luxembourg. I'm the head of Education Media Technology, and I teach a grade 6 digital ethics class. We have been online since March 16th. We are actually next week going to bring in half of our 6th through 10th graders back to school with 2 meters social distancing and a lot of complexities that are directives from the Ministry of Education of Luxembourg and the Ministry of Education of Ministry of Health of Luxembourg. And then, so we'll have half a cohort on for a week, then they go back home and another cohort come in, and we'll be replicating that with our pre-K through 5. And I can only tell you that the dynamics and the complexities are much more complicated than pivoting to online learning. Which is kind of amazing to think, because that was quite a change and a very sudden change for many of us around the world. So I look forward to sharing a few of my experiences and being part of this conversation.
Great. And Paola?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paola Ortiz. I teach grade 5 at Cayman International School in the Cayman Islands. So you can think of this place as a heaven. And it is, it's absolutely beautiful. We have been doing our home learning program since March 16, where our director kindly explained to us the protocol and our principals guided us through the home learning program. We have a variety of different sources. Our technology has been on task helping us out, support from the learning support teams as well, guiding and helping those students who need a little bit more support. Teachers are doing a variety of different things in order to engage their students online and continue this virtual learning. And I look forward to sharing what some of the teachers have been doing and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Jessica.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Phillips. I am a first grade teacher and team leader at the American International School in Guangzhou, China. Our school has been online since February 3rd, and we have primarily been using Seesaw in the lower grades from K to 6, or sorry, excuse me, K to 5 for our online instruction. And right now our school is also, as some have already mentioned, preparing to go back. And so we're in the process of creating a blended learning program right now. But I'm excited to share all of the things that have been happening at my school with online learning. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful. And Dave.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is David Shepard. I'm a learning innovation coach at Shekou International School in Shenzhen, China. And like Jessica and Keisha, I've been online learning since the beginning of February, and it's been a roller coaster. And I'm excited to share some of the highs and lows that's come along with that. I work primarily with primary students, but our secondary students started going back to school last week. So we've started blended learning with them.
Wonderful. And also on the screen, you'll see John Burns. John, do you want to say hi real quick?
Hi, I'm John Burns. I work, so no worries. I was muting and like running the chat. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for International School Services, and I'm just going to help out with Q&A and a few questions.
Great, thanks. To get us started, one of the first questions that we heard from a lot of people ahead of time was, what should we be doing differently as we enter week 8 or week 12 or whatever week we're in, and some schools still have many more weeks to go. So what should be different and what should stay the same? Paola, do you want to start us off with that question?
Sure. Let me share some of the things that we are doing in our school and what I have had some success with. Oops. No, it's not. So we have a variety of different things that students can do, but I want to stress on the importance that now more than ever, teachers have been doing the instruction, and now we are becoming more of designers of what the curriculum is, specifically designing experiences where our students can navigate largely on their own and presenting our lessons through a model that is easy for students to follow, easy for them to accomplish, and relatively easy for them to get the assignments done within a day. So there are a variety of different things that teachers can do, and one of the most important things that we can continue doing is our morning meetings. Morning meetings give the students a space where there is familiarity, there is the sharing, there is the common ground of students communicating what they like, what they're passionate about. There are different ways that morning meetings can take place. There's a variety of Padlet greetings that also can additionally provide students with a ground for them to share. Flipgrid has been used as well, and I use it quite often. It's a short video or a short conversation that takes place on different topics. Excuse me. One of the things that I have found really useful is the opportunity that teachers have now more than ever is to provide students with interest-independent projects. Those students that have the skills to work independently, that can do research, that are driven naturally, can engage wonderfully in independent, passionate projects that they feel a need and they're interested in, and those are really important. Morning check-ins also provide a way for teachers to monitor how the student is doing. Now more so than ever, because in our classroom, we could see how our student was coming in, if they were happy, if they were sad. But now in this new setting, it isn't as easy. And so a morning check-in allows us the opportunity to experience that and to give a chance for that student to speak up and to share in a way, in a private way sometimes, or in a community. Science experiments hands-on has been very helpful, giving students an opportunity to use materials that they can easily find at home, so that they can do science experiments, so that they can run different things, and connect it directly to our curriculum. Additionally, creative opinion writing stories. My students worked together in different creative opinion writing stories, working with mentor texts, using mentor texts to support that learning. And they all collaborated in putting a story together, sharing the document, working together, sharing ideas, and coming up with crazy endings and using persuasive language, phrases and opinions in order to convince parents of a particular pet that they wanted. The same thing can work out for guided reading groups. We use a lot of RAS Kids as well as EPIC, and those provide the opportunity for students to also share and continue learning as readers and writers are needed. The importance of communicating and sharing ideas throughout a book, providing students with that opportunity to reflect on that book, to use Seesaw to post reflections, to post questions. The same thing can be done with Padlet as well, where you have a student sharing their ideas, and you can build a conversation on their thoughts about the character, about the plot, about what was happening on with the story. And so those provide a ground for students to actually be able to share in a virtual way. The last thing I wanted to share also with you was educational video reflections. There are many sources out there on YouTube that provide us with lessons on empathy, on working together, on collaborating. And it's important for students to watch these so that they can understand how things are being done, and they can reflect on specific behaviors and reflect on what also can be provided to problem solve. In addition, I like to use Mark Church's Think, Puzzle, Explore ideas as a strategy. It's similar to the KWL, but it helps the students work and think in a different way. So students are able to share in a Padlet or in Flipgrid. They're able to share what they're thinking and then what they're puzzled about in a connection to a social studies or a science lesson. And so they can explore later on those puzzling questions and dive deep into their research. I also like to reflect on what was a yuck or a yay idea. So the idea of something that was difficult becomes a yuck. And those things are oftentimes reflected in the morning check-ins, also as an exit ticket, so that students are aware that the teacher knows what may be difficult for them, knows what can be challenging as well. You also have the yays, the wonderful, the great lessons, and the success stories. And it's always important to keep in mind that those success stories are worthy of sharing so that other students can also see how successful a peer has been. Now more than ever, I strongly believe in us building this virtual community. And there are different ways that you can do that. Read Alouds have provided a great source for that community so that students are able to communicate and continue participating in a discussion and building that relationship with their peers as well. Now, also, I would like to add the last thing is engaging our students virtually has been challenging. Keeping them motivated is challenging because we're not physically there. However, if we empower our students with learning that is driven with enthusiasm, that is driven with creative activities, that has content that they are interested in, we can build a successful learning experience virtually.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move us on to our next question, which is really about opportunities. You know, now that we're teaching online and so much of what we're doing in our interaction with students is online, how do we help our students feel included, and how do we help our online learning become more interactive? Dave, you want to take us with that question?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. Well, I think the first thing to help students feel more included is to maybe have this conversation with them. I think actually all of the things that we're going to talk about today, you would get some valuable information from your students by having this exact conversation with them, and just be there to listen and see what they come up with. I've been in a few Zoom meetings with a few different classes, and we've talked about, you know, why are you showing up today, and what can we do to help others that are not showing up. And you know, kids always come up with really great ideas, so I think this is a really great opportunity to hear from them, right? And I think that the conversation piece, and like Paola was saying the check-in piece, and that human connection, that interaction, that's going to get most kids to the door. And then, you know, how do we get them to stay? How do we get them to keep coming back? I think that for a lot of kids that conversation is going to do the trick, but there's a lot of other kids that maybe not so much. I know, you know, for me personally, I don't know if that would be enough to get me to be coming back to class every day. So I think it's about creating these shared moments, even in an online space. Something that's been really effective that I've seen at our school is teachers using games to do that. I mean, who doesn't like to have fun and play a game? And I'll admit I'm a super board game nerd and role-playing nerd, so this is like right up my alley. One tool that I think is really neat is something called zoomjam.org. Zoom Jam was created as a challenge to game developers, where some people basically just threw it out there on the internet and said, hey, game developers, you know, instead of having people play video games at home alone, what can you come up with that we can play together on Zoom? And it was an online competition, there was voting involved, and it was really interesting because the first, I've been following it for, you know, maybe a month or two, and the first month, the most popular game was, you know, what pet is in the background, where you're just like looking to wait to see whose cat is going to jump into the screen. But now that it's kind of wrapped up and all of the voting is finalized, the top 3 games are all games that where people interact with each other, right? And there's community building. The top one is something called Class President, where each participant takes on a role, and you get to do a little bit of role playing. And you create a character for yourself, and you build a backstory. So there's that narrative element, which keeps people coming back too, right? But you're also interacting socially, and in that game, you're trying to become the class president. So there's like lying and backstabbing and like all of that fun stuff that everybody loves. And then the other top games, there's a Pride of Lions game. And that one, you have to protect your group. And then the other one is about searching for treasure in Atlantis as a team. So I think games are a great way to have that shared moment with our students and to get them active and involved in something that doesn't explicitly have to do with the curriculum, right? But I think more important than that, it's building the relationships, which is really what we do, right? We're in the relationship business more than anything else. So yeah, zoomjam.org is a lot of fun.
Fantastic, thank you. For question number 3, we got a lot of questions about primary school students, and with early years, elementary school, how can we help our students get the most out of our time online without keeping them attached to a computer screen all day long? Jessica, do you want to start us with that question?
Absolutely, I would love to. So a lot of the success that we've seen at our school has come through a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning interactions with students. Synchronous and asynchronous, if you're not sure what that means, synchronous meaning live lessons via some kind of chat like Zoom or some Google app, as well as asynchronous, which is more of the you create digital lessons where students can complete these lessons and input their assignments at a different kind of pace where they're pre-recorded. So the best kind of way that we found is a really good mix of both of them. So at our school, we are creating our lessons that are asynchronous, where we have been using Explain EDU and a lot of other tools through Seesaw to post lessons that are, and this is very important, especially for lower grades, that the lessons are only about 5 to 7 minutes max to just limit that amount of screen time. But then the task that we ask them to do after the actual mini lesson is over is a task that doesn't require them to be on a screen. So they're given this instruction or lesson via a video that they watch that's 5 minutes. We send them off to go do something hands-on, whether that be writing on paper and pencil, reading books and reflecting in a journal, doing a science experiment, or doing some research on something, or doing some kind of math hands-on activity. And then we have the kids come back after and take photos and show their work that way so that we can see their progress and their learning, so that they're not spending so much of their time. It's really as much as it takes for them to watch that video. Then they can go off and do the task and then come back and show us what they've done through submitting pictures and writing and things like that. As for Zoom, for the synchronous piece of that, the thing that we found that works best for our kids is making learning fun in those Zoom calls, just like Dave was talking about with games. So games are a huge way during those synchronous times where you can really get students involved with the content as well as connection. So in the links, I think Dana will post it in the chat, I found these 20 Zoom activities for students, and it is a really great resource that I've been using with my class in first grade, as well as all of the grade levels at our school. The games are silly, interactive, they're really descriptive, but they provide the students with interaction with each other, and they can be adapted for any grade level. Some of the games may seem babyish for older kids, but they really can be adapted quite well. And the last thing I want to say in regards to this is that quality over quantity is key for our lower elementary and our elementary students in general. Don't feel like you have to give every subject in every content area a lesson every single day. As a parent and a teacher, I see how long it takes students to complete a lot of the work that they're getting assigned. And we started off by giving all content area every single day to all students. And I found that for my children at my house, as well as my students and getting input from them, it was taking them a lot longer than what they were able to do in a full school day. So we limited the amount and kind of alternated it a bit. Started doing let's have reading and math on Monday, Wednesday, and then maybe Tuesday, Thursday, let's assign and talk only about science and social studies and writing, so that the kids are not spending so much time trying to be a jack of all trades just to get everything done very quickly, but they're really having quality working, on those simple 2 subjects per day that we've asked them to do.
Wonderful. Paola, I know that you wanted to chime in here as well, but we just have can I give you a real quick, a minute so we can move on to the secondary as well? Can you do that?
Absolutely. Let me just share and support Jessica's comment on the importance of games and using Seesaw in order to project whatever activities that we do. My students love to do scavenger hunts, so I program the scavenger hunt and then they go off and then they can post it. It's a fun way to do offline activities as well, making connections to real world issues. How can they support the earth? How can they make a Mother's Day card now that Mother's Day is coming up on Sunday? Do a variety of tribe activities as well. Curriculum projects that they can do. My students have baked and cooked and done artwork with me online, and then they can enjoy whatever it is that they've baked or cooked with their family, and they love that. They're 5th graders. They're trying their very best to make do with the situation and enjoying it. They're posting on favorites. They've brought their pets to school one day. They've brought toys to school as well. So it's just a matter of doing it fun so that students are continuously engaged.
Wonderful. And I know you prepared some great slides, so we're going to share those as well so people can have reference to all of those. I'd like to move us on to secondary because, well, as a parent of 3 secondary students, I see, John, do you have any engagement strategies for reluctant secondary students? Because I can see that fatigue hitting my high schoolers and one college student where they're just like, oh, great, another one of these. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think one of the challenges, especially in a secondary school, when you go from 6th to 12th grade, it's a very different spectrum pedagogically in age. And of course, maybe in the 11th and 12th grade, it's more exam driven. And of course, they're different state. But I think the thing that we've discovered in our experience in secondary school is you really need to have clarity and consistency in the way you set things up. Kids, if they have to juggle between 6, 7, 8 different courses, if everyone looks different, it becomes quite confusing. And often in the confusion, there is a level of disengagement. So I think clarity and consistency, I know we don't want all to be vanilla, but I think in these circumstances, that really helps. The other thing is really creating an environment for regular check-ins, be it by email or in a discussion group or breakout sessions. That's something we've discovered is really helpful, is those conferencing. We use an interface called Schoology, and there is a thing called conferencing in their breakout rooms. And one thing that we have discovered, some teachers have feedback, is just letting the kids get into the room and hang out by themselves for a few minutes. That gives them the capacity to build those social circles and see each other in the context of the classroom. I think also is the idea of student-driven projects. This idea of voice and choice is really important. And I think what Jessica and Paola have been sharing, and so have David, is many of these strategies that happen in an elementary school setting are absolutely valid in an upper school, high school setting. I think sometimes we forget, and I think this idea of choice and voice becomes really important. I think also being mindful that within a class, some of the kids will know why the other kid might be disengaged, maybe using some of their friendships. Sometimes it's easier to talk to a friend than your teacher, and just being mindful and being in tune with the culture of your class and knowing who might be a good person to go and tap that kid's shoulder and say, hey, come in, it's fun, So I think sometimes using that. The other thing is really taking advantage of the counseling, the EAL, and the learning specialist teams, because sometimes things are happening that maybe in the busyness you're not aware of, that they're aware of, and making sure those communication flows are open and everybody is helping each other with that. Jessica talked about synchronous and asynchronous. I think combining them is really important. There are times where it makes sense to be synchronous and other times where it doesn't. And I think being able to juggle that and find that balance, I think is also really important. I think the thing that we've really, the feedback from kids and parents is this idea of a really clear framework and architecture where it's, and not overwhelming. I think when kids feel overwhelmed or they're confused and not clear, because we need to remember, every home setting is very different. We don't know what the home setting's like, what the dynamics are. There might be other narratives going on, and I think we need to be mindful. So whatever we can do to simplify and bring clarity, and also not overwhelm them with too much content. And one thing that we have done is definitely cut back on the amount of content, understanding that maybe in our enthusiasm, we try to replicate the live classroom, and that's just not tenable for many kids, and being able to pull back a bit. I think it's just, you know, using all these different tools and methodologies and being flexible and understanding that not one always works for the other, but this idea of consistency and within teams. One thing we have discovered, groups that work as teams are far more successful than people that all go off on their own, because there's consistency, there's the same narrative, there's the same approach, and then kids talk to each other, and there's that consistency amongst their peers that maybe are not in the same class, but they're having the same experience. And I think that also has been really important. What you know, teachers around the world is doing is phenomenal, and that team approach is even more important to really support not only the team members as colleagues, but the students. So I think these are some of the, in a nutshell, some of the, you know, different tools and workflows that I would definitely engage with, and always getting students' opinion. I think David said it so well. Kids will tell you if it's working or not. Ask them, you know, and really just ask them, and they'll tell you, and what works, and if it doesn't work, what about this? And they might have suggestions. And then, of course, one thing that we're doing, and I know many schools are doing too, is getting input from parents, because they're seeing school far more visibly than they ever have. It's in their living room. They get to see the screen. When a kid's on a Zoom call, they might be on a Zoom call with work. It's just so it's not invisible anymore. It's very, very visible. And I think they might also sometimes have a voice that might help construct that flexibility to adapt to some of these things.
John, I couldn't agree with you more, and on everything that you said. And I do think that it'll be interesting when we go back to whatever we go back to, the skill sets of our students and our teachers and our parents will have all changed and shifted in their understanding of school, and how that will impact schools in the future, I think will be massive. But that's a whole nother webinar for a different day.
That is another webinar, absolutely. Yeah. School will never be the same. We know that for sure. Yeah, excellent point.
Keisha, I know that one of the things you wanted to talk about was Zoom fatigue. And I know that I have it on a regular basis. There are days where I have 9-10 Zoom calls in a row and I walk away like, so how do we keep the spirit alive during our online sessions? And how do we deal with Zoom fatigue?
Dana, I think Paula, Jessica, John, and Dave touched a bit on this. Just person first has been our mantra here at NCIC. The student in front of us, the families, the teachers, everybody being involved. And so early on, our admin team came out with 4 C's to help guide our work online: clarity, connection, creativity, and calm. And that piece on clarity, like, does everybody understand the message? Do we know what we're doing? Do the kids know what they're doing? Do the parents understand how to make this happen? And so, like you said, Zoom calls. Are the Zoom meetings an hour long? Are they 90 minutes long? You know, what is developmentally appropriate for grade levels? And are we all on the same page? Which connects as well to what John just spoke to about working as teams. So we have grade levels, and so there's a grade level conversation, there's a division level conversation, and there's a whole school conversation to make sure that there's clarity around what we're doing and why we're doing it the way we are doing it. So in the lower elementary, and I have been working directly with PY through 3rd grade, and I've been supporting them in ELA and EAL during this online situation. And we have been able to, for PY, they're not lasting long. And like Paula said, if it's recorded and it's being used, it's 5 to 7 minutes. It's really short. It's like your mini lesson in your Readers Writers workshop. And when you're on that Zoom call, you're also being mindful of how long you're expecting kids to stay still. So we're chunking those activities where whether it's a 10-2, we're doing something for about 10 minutes, and then there is time to consolidate that, to reflect on that, to make connections. And one of the features in Zoom that's been really helpful with that chunking, with that consolidating, with using those Kagan strategies is the breakout room. So we have co-teachers as well for each of our grade levels in elementary. There are 2 teachers, an English immersion and a Chinese immersion teacher. And so for some of those, whether it's morning meeting or small group reading, or it's a live lesson around science or social studies, they're making use, some of the grades are making use of the breakout room. So the kids can go away, have a conversation that is facilitated for us, because, you know, at elementary, we do want to have some adult supervision during those conversations. There's an adult in that room with them, they're having those conversations and they're coming back. So as much as possible to give an opportunity to interact with what's happening, because we know that passive learning is not something that we would have been promoting if they were face-to-face. So online, we are also being mindful of those learning principles that we've committed to around student ownership, around the nature of learning, and students being in different places. So 1, breakout rooms, 2, chunking the learning that's going on. That input, intake, output, input is not meant to be the majority of your lesson. The majority of that lesson should be intake, and that's where the kids are actively engaging with the learning that's happening for that lesson. Around clarity as well, with learning targets, having students join you, it's a learning journey with them. So very clear about what our goal is for our time online today. Sometimes the time online today is community building. It is that, you know, John spoke to the opportunity for students to be able to check in with each other. It is for them to check in with the student, but whatever it is, that time online, just having clarity. You don't want a student logging in and just kind of waiting around and being unsure what's going to be done to them for the 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes that you have them online. You want them to know what they're getting, what they're turning up for, and how they're participating during that time. In addition to chunking and breakout rooms, and like I said, the Kagan strategies, turn and talk looks a bit different when you're online, but the breakout rooms can help with some of that small group conversation that feeds back. Movement is something that is used a lot. I've seen the teachers using Go Noodle like they would in their classroom. They're having that. I was in a 1st grade small group reading, and the students were up using their arms to spell out their words that they were working on, sharing with each other. So involving that movement also helps with the Zoom fatigue, because they have discovered how to annotate and so after a while, they're drawing over the screen and they're having a conversation on the side, because some students have by that time tuned out. And so one of the things that we've been working on in elementary, because we record all of our lessons, is actively going back and rewatching those lessons. Sometimes using the protocol that Jim Knight has and the impact cycle to say, you know, what are we seeing? What's the evidence that we're seeing and why? So that we can identify those time periods that work very well for students. So if we notice that we are 15 minutes in and we're getting high engagement, and then we hit 17 minutes and things start to fall apart, well, that's the number that you're working with. So let's figure out how to make that work. So I think that would be one of my suggestions, because it's having the opportunity again on Zoom to record your lessons and to use that to reflect on. That is real data in front of you. And for those of you who know Jim Knight's impact cycle, recording lessons is a big part of that, so that you have the evidence. You're not just going off feelings. And that fits right in there for those schools that are using data-wise as well. You have evidence, so as you move up that level of that ladder of inference, your action can be based on the evidence you're collecting. The last thing I'll say, again, has been mentioned before by everyone. Games are a big thing with keeping students actively engaged online. Games for their academic-based games. There are brain breaks that are happening. Responsive Classroom has been really helpful because, again, they know the structure of their morning meetings. They know they're going to do a greeting, a sharing, an activity, and there's a message. So whatever we can do around clarity, making the expectations clear and the goal of our time together clear, connecting all that's going on, the creativity through games and projects, and then maintain some level of calm for that. I think that is also connected to knowing what to expect when you turn up for that lesson.
Wonderful, thank you. And you just answered my question because we saw in the chat a couple of people were like, what were the 4 C's? So just to reiterate, the 4 C's are clarity, connecting, creativity, and calm, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll type those in there on the chat as well for those of you who want those. Our final question before we move it into the live Q&A is on sustainability. Like, how do we continue to motivate students to complete work and show up to calls after months and months of online learning? So how do we keep them motivated? I know both Jessica and Dave wanted to answer that question. Jessica, you want to start us off, and then we'll try to keep it kind of short so we can open up to Q&A.
Absolutely. I can talk pretty quick. So a few things like we've been talking about before is if you make it fun, they're going to want to be there. They're going to want to be with you. So there's a few links of things that I've been doing with my class that Dana will post in the chat of a wakelet of non-content based, but just fun Friday activities, as well as a countdown to the end of the school year for this school year. With an ABC countdown that can be adapted for lots of different ages. Fun is definitely a thing I'm a huge proponent of to make my students want to come. The next thing that I think is really valuable is if we're asking students to give or do the assignments that we're giving them, then we should be giving them timely feedback as much as possible. Students won't find value in the work that we're giving them if we're not giving them the feedback that's necessary to do that. If at all possible, oral feedback is best. Let them hear your voice. If it's a pre-recorded lesson that they're watching and then they're submitting something, if there's a way with whatever platform you're using to give them an oral feedback, that will be what's best. If they can hear your voice, it will motivate them to keep coming back and doing their very best work. Another thing that I think is super valuable, like a few others have talked about, is ask your students. Even at the lowest of grades, I created a survey for my classroom to complete that asked them about what are the best ways that help them to learn and how online learning has been going. The survey that I actually created was one of the Fun Friday activities called Feedback Friday for my students. And it really gave a lot of clarity to me on ways that I could make learning better for them to make them want to be there. And then the last thing, a couple of people have already talked about this, is give students choice. Give choice boards wherever possible to help drive their personal curiosities and their interests so that they're really passionate about what they're doing. So it's not that it's being forced on them, but that they're really wanting to do it. All right.
Wonderful. And Dave?
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, Jessica hit the nail on the head. Fun is super key, and maybe just thinking about what is fun, like what does that actually mean? I think for a lot of our students, like being surprised, you know? So even though we have that consistency, keep the surprises coming, keep them on their toes. I think activities that offer, you know, freedom and imagination and the chance for them to feel like they're a part of something, that's really defining what fun is. So things like that. And along with that, I think this is the perfect opportunity to reassess the work that we're actually giving our students. So maybe it's a chance to try something new that you haven't done before, taking a risk as a teacher, maybe trying some project-based learning or Genius Hour. And a great place to get started with that is the author John Spencer. He's an author and educator. Follow him on Twitter. Read his books over the summer, and just to get started right now, check out the website spencerauthor.com. And I can put that in the links that we'll send out. But yeah, he talks a lot about moving from student engagement to student empowerment. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind right now.
Wonderful, thank you. John, do you want to take over and help us with the live Q&A?
Yep, no problem. And in the spirit of surprise, Dave, I like that. I'll start off with a bit of a curveball. And it's come out of a theme that's emerged from, I think, something John said earlier. And a lot of people, it resonated with a lot of people in the chat. Less is more. We all agree less is more in school. So what gets cut? What can we remove? What can transform? What can be mitigated? What can change? John, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, one thing is student voice is really important in that dialogue. So if you're maybe some of the feedback the kids are saying it's too much, why not ask them what is, you know, what are the things maybe that we could focus more on that you want to focus less? And there are a lot of visible thinking routines that you can do to kind of gauge the temperature and an idea. I think sometimes, you know, in the enthusiasm or the belief that you can replicate the physical classroom in the online world, we've maybe added a lot of workflows that are unnecessary or really don't have purpose. And I think that's the other thing is what is the why of why you're doing your lesson? What is the objective and outcome, really being clear. And then as a team, I think this is where the teaming comes important, is have a common vision and mission and philosophy of what is the purpose of what we're doing. And I think, Keisha had the 4 C's. That's great. Have something like that as a team, develop some common agreements that you say, this is the essentials that we want to engage with and want to ensure the kids walk away with these learnings and understanding. So I think, it's a combination of that clarity, student voice, always ask them what's working, what's not working, and then be able to be courageous and take that feedback, don't take it personally, and then reconfigure, recurate, and then choreograph something that maybe is more meaningful for everybody involved, including the team that you're working with. So that might be one of the suggestions I would share out.
It really sounds like your practice is evolving over time, whether it's the actual pedagogical practice in classroom you're rethinking, whether it's the operational workflow stuff you're rethinking, but it is a constant cycle, isn't it? Has anyone got anything to add? Oh, sorry, John.
No, I just think what you're saying is really important. As educators, the thing that we always need to be available to do is reflect on our own practice and have that growth model, that growth mindset, but also ensuring that the kids have a voice, because you can reflect on your own and you might be a little off cue from what the kids are. So I think it's that, the willingness to collaborate with the kids and empower them and give them that voice to co-curate what you're delivering is also an important thing to consider.
Thanks, John. Anyone have anything to add? So another topic of discussion that came up amongst the panelists and also within the chat was that, there's this level of disengagement we're seeing across various year levels. And particularly, I think one of the questions in the Q&A came up was, there's often a reluctance for middle school students to showcase their learning, to put their face on the screen, to be on a video call. What are some strategies, maybe, Paola, we might kick off with you, to help out in those situations when you're not getting that face-to-face contact with students and they're maybe not posting something because they're a little bit reluctant to share their work?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, because as a matter of fact, I do have 1 or 2 students who don't like to put their face out there. So what I've done is I've had them just do the face with me sometimes. In other cases, they can go into a private room so that they can have that conversation if they don't want to. I have found also that those students who tend to be the more eager, the more outgoing, are the ones that can do things a lot faster than those that have to process things a little bit better. And so small group work, small group meets, Google Meets, are the best way to help and support a student. Finding ways in which the learning support team can also chip in and build that rapport with the student is very important as well. Contact with parents has also helped, so that a student can see that it's not him only or her only that lacks this inability to produce work or that feels disengaged, but it's also mom can help in, can support in one way or another. And finding the one-to-one moment for that student to interact with just the teacher. That is super important to continue building that rapport with the teacher.
And I think they're really practical strategies, aren't they? Like smaller group sizes,
Yes.
access this existing support you have on staff in terms of those specialists, and then getting parents on board. Yeah, Keisha, do you want to add to that? You're on mute, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, I think John spoke to this, leveraging the counseling department as well. So we have check-ins and having the counselor speak with the student, because sometimes we see behavior and we attach meaning to it, which might not actually be the real reason behind those behaviors. So they could be disengaged for many different reasons. So whoever is that student's adult, whether it's that classroom teacher or the advisor or the counselor, somebody being able to check in with them so that they have a chance to verbalize what's going on with them, and then have support in creating a support system, whether that is breaking down their lessons or finding out if they need to be in a private room or set up a private session. I think the counseling department can be quite supportive with that. And I know that they've been very supportive on our end with our students.
Thanks, Keisha. We've probably got time for 2 more questions, Dana, do you think? Jessica, I'll go to you for this one because it's specific about elementary school. We've had a lot of talk about synchronous time, asynchronous time. For those not familiar, synchronous is face-to-face calls. Asynchronous might be engaging with content that teachers posted. One that was voted up right to the top was, how much time should elementary students be spending, say, per day in a synchronous fashion? And is that different in early years versus early elementary versus upper elementary?
All right, I would love to tackle this question. So our school has really been mindful of this because our parent community has been giving us a lot of feedback about the amount of time our kids are spending on screens. As for the synchronous time, we have had it so that there are 30 minutes every day for students to get on for synchronous learning. Whether that be the 30 minutes might be for not lesson teaching, but just connection, asking questions, interacting, or listening to a read aloud, or learning some kind of new content, many different ways. But 30 minutes a day has been what our school has been doing, as well as it has been optional. We haven't forced kids into it because there are some parents who are really concerned about the screen time issue, especially with younger children, that they really want their kids to not have to do that. So we as a school decided that no new teaching would happen during those synchronous times, so that if students were not to be able to join for the fear of having too much screen time, that they would not have to worry about missing content during those times.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, that it is just so different for different families, different students, different year levels. We probably have time to get a secondary perspective on that really quickly if someone wants to jump in. What does that look like in terms of secondary and maybe upper high school and the DP?
I think screen time at the older years is a different dynamic because most kids are more independent and they have their smartphones, they have their devices, and they tend maybe not to have as much supervision, and maybe some of the impact that I think Jessica talked about for the lower years in primary is different. But I think still, as we as adults have experienced, we need that balance. We are exhausted from Zoom, and I think that's where wellness becomes really important. And I know our PE department and our health department have had wellness Wednesdays. There are just other ways, and really making sure that even though we're always online, we're making it clear and supporting kids to have an awareness of that balance. And I think that's where, the PE department that can't physically do a lot of PE, sometimes they've been really focusing on health and wellness, and the counselors also have done a wonderful job, and I'm sure it's the same in all the schools around the world, where they're really engaging parents to understand that there needs to be that balance. Just closing your laptop. And there are things that you can do, without being online. I think online is kind of an opportunity to check in with each other, give a task, and then you can go offline, do the task, and come back, and being able, truncating that to make sure there's enough times and motivations to disconnect and then reconnect. But I think For older kids, as they self-manage, that still is very important. I think, you know, curating and making sure you scaffold things so they understand how to disconnect too. And as adults, we struggle. I mean, I have never spent so much time in Zoom in my life in the last 9 weeks. It's just, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, we'll all be on a 12-step program against Zoom when we come back, you know, or something. Who knows?
It sounds like, yeah, you're really, it sounds like you're cognizant of it, right? Like first and foremost, be cognizant that it may be an issue, and then be proactive in the strategies you use to help mitigate it, right?
Yeah, and use the counselors and all the other great resources that we have to support that conversation.
Thanks, John. Last one, there are a number of coaches floating around in the chat and in the Q&A. Dave, I'll go to you for this one, but how has coaching changed now? The role of a coach, what does your job look like now that you're online and not essentially or face-to-face with someone?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I'm still trying to figure out half the time. But yeah, and it's changed significantly since when we first started this. When we first went online, I was really more IT of just, you know, making sure kids and families are connected. That's #1 priority. So that was pretty much the first 2.5 weeks of online learning. And then since then, it's been helping teachers to kind of come up with a lot of the things that we talked about today, like keeping the students engaged. What are we doing for assessment? What assessments do we need to do? That sort of thing. So I've seen a big shift over the course of online learning. And I don't know, I always say yes to everything. That's kind of my motto. That's been my go-to. Whatever a teacher needs, I'll say yes. If it's coming in to read a story for pre-K, I'll do it. If they need a lesson on coding, I'll do it, you know? So I think just being there, letting teachers know that I'm there to support them. And again, it's the same thing as the kids. It's like keeping that relationship with the teachers as well.
Yeah, it sounds, that's fantastic, because it sounds like you're getting more opportunity to engage in discussions around contemporary pedagogy practice, rather than some of the initial stuff where you're just, how do I log into Seesaw, or how do I share this Google Doc, or all those things that would happen, or Teams in your instance, I think, in China.
Right.
I think we're good, Dana.
Okay, Keisha, I thought I saw you raise your hand. Did you want to say something real quick?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. As working in the coaching role for lower elementary, I think because we are physically apart, being able to still have the coaching conversations with the teachers, whether we're reflecting on lessons or we're planning for what's upcoming, it's literally sometimes just being that sounding board for them to be able to say, I want to do this much. I know I can't. I think I should do this. Can you talk it through with me? And so sometimes it's literally just being their thinking partner when I go into coaching conversations with teachers.
Great, thank you. I want to make sure that I get a chance to thank all of our participants and all of our panelists. And I think it's just so important for all of us to realize that, you know, first of all, we're all learning this together, and good enough is good enough. Like, we are surviving in times that are, and our teachers are just, I've never been more honored to be an educator and to be among so many great people who are just working so hard around the clock trying to make learning happen. And so we appreciate it so much. And you know, our goal in all of this is really just to help be the bridge for quality online learning. What does that look like? And we know it's not going to go away. And how do we help that? And we are also cognizant of the fact that the end of the year is fast approaching. Some schools are ending very soon. Some still have 5-6 weeks to go. And we're not certain how long to continue webinars. And we're not certain, you know, do you do them in the summer? No. Do you give everyone just a total mind break? Do we start back up in the fall? I was hoping to try to create a poll, and I couldn't actually, I don't think we have the option in this to do a poll on what that was like. So we'll figure out a different, but if you have any just things, any thoughts on whether we should continue and what would work for you in the future, that would be great if you could throw that in the chat as well. And I just want to make sure that we thank everyone for all of the hard work that you're doing, and especially for our panelists today for your time and for your vulnerability and generosity for sharing with our community. So thank you so much. And we're going to continue. Oh, and next week, so the next two we have set up is next week we're going to do math and science teachers. We have early years, elementary, middle, and high school for math and science. Those are our panelists. And then the week after that, we have English and social studies, so specific strategies and techniques for, and again, all 4 divisions as well. So we've got teachers who have been doing this. We're going to pull them in and find out what's working for them. So please feel free to give us your feedback on the chat, and we'll be sending links to everything afterwards. And just a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. And we appreciate your time again today. Thank you.